Hello and welcome. Week number 13 of Programming Fundamentals with Python course. Today lecture is about functions. Functions are an important building block of any programming language. Let us see what we are going to learn in today's lecture. We will start our lecture with objectives as usual, and then I will define what a function is, what is the syntax, how we can give names to the function, and what are the benefits of using function inside a program. After that, I will discuss two types of functions, that is built-in and user-defined function. Then we will see how a function can actually return a value with the help of return keyword. And the two basic components of a function, there is function definition and how we can actually call a function to perform its duty. And finally, we will see indentation inside a function. Starting with the objectives, I expect that at the end of this lecture, you would be able to learn about basic concept of the function, their types, and advantages of using function. You will also learn how actually functions are performed, how the responsibility of the function is achieved. I mean to say that how we can actually define a function and how we can call a function. We'll be able to learn about these concepts, and these concepts will allow you to learn and write programs that demonstrate the use of function in order to perform certain tasks. Uh, I would like to remind that in this week we will cover only theoretical aspects. If you are interested in learning the practical implementation of the functions, then you have to refer to the practical session of this. Let us start with the proper introduction of a function. Actually, a function is nothing but a group of statements. When I say a group of statement, it means a single statement or more than one statement that are declared inside the body of the function. So actually, a function is a group of statements that exist within a program, and the purpose is to perform a specific task. In Python, functions are, you can say, a group of related statements that can be called together. Uh, Call together mean you have to call a function in order to perform a certain task, and that task is made up of related statements. So function typically perform a specific task. Sometimes the functions can take a value from the user, while other times they do not accept a value from a user. Sometimes a function may return a value, while the other times they do not return a value, and we will see how that is possible in a couple of minutes. Uh, the basic question is, why do we need function? So instead of writing a large program as a single one long sequence of statements, it can be written as several small functions, each one performing a specific part of the task, which means that small functions can be executed in the desired order to perform the overall task. A function is a concept which actually allow the programmers to divide the program into subsections or submodules, and then you can call these modules at several places inside your program. Actually, this will help to make your code more modular, easier, and simpler to understand if you are using the concept of function. It also means that the same function can be called multiple times, which actually refers to reusability. So if you are using the concept of function, you will be able to reuse your code at certain locations in your program. Like variables, like list, like tuples, and like loop variables, we actually require to give a function a proper name. Just as the name of any variable that you use inside your program, you also have to give a proper name, a descriptive name to your function. A function name should be descriptive, which means anyone who is reading your code can reasonably guess what the function will do. Python requires that you follow the same rules and regulation that you follow when naming variables. For example, you cannot use the Python keywords as a function name. A function name cannot contain spaces. The first character of a function name must start with a letter A to Z, either capital or small, or it could be an underscore. After first letter, you can use even digits like 0 up to 9, any digit that you want, and some special character as well, like underscore. Both uppercase and lowercase are allowed to be used for function. So the names, regulations, and rules are almost the same. Here are some examples of the functions, function names. Here, name of the function is sum. Here in this example, the name of the function is average, while here the name of the function is my underscore message. And you can see all the function names here are descriptive. They actually tell us about the task that the function is going to perform. In this case, this function will add some numbers. This will calculate or find the average of some numbers, while this will display a message on the screen. So the name must be descriptive. Now again, let us come back to the question why we actually use functions. What are the benefits of using functions? The first obvious benefit of using the function is code simplicity. A program code tends to be smaller, simpler, and easier to understand when it is broken down into functions. And several small functions are much easier to read than one long sequence of statements. Simplicity is the first benefit. Reusability, which is very much important, especially in object oriented programming. So, functions also reduce the duplication of code within a program. If a specific operation is performed in several places in a program, a function can be written only once to perform that operation. Then it could be executed anytime from any location if it is needed in the program. This benefit of using function is known as code reusability. Because you are writing the code to perform a task only once, then reusing it each time you need to perform that task. Also, if you are using a function, then you will be able to achieve better testing performance. When each task within a program is contained in its own block, that is function, then testing and debugging become simpler. Programmers can test each function in a program individually to determine whether it correctly performs its operation or not. And this makes it easier to isolate and fix errors. On the other side, if you are using function, you would be able to develop the program faster. Suppose a programmer or a team of programmers is developing multiple programs. They discover that each of the programs performs several common tasks, such as asking for a username and password, or displaying the current time, and so on. It doesn't make sense to write the code for these tasks multiple times. Instead, functions can be written for the commonly needed tasks, and those functions can be incorporated into each program that them. Faster development is possible because of the functions. And also, it will facilitate the work if you are working in a group, in a team. It will facilitate your work if you are using functions. Okay, so you can say it actually make it easier for the programmers to work in teams. When a program is developed as a set of functions that each perform an individual task, then different programmers can be assigned the job of writing different functions, and then their solutions will be combined. Okay, so it facilitates the working in an environment where programmers are working in a team. After seeing the benefits of a function, let us see how actually it works. When a function is called, or we can say invoked, a program actually jumps from where the function was called to the location to the point where the function. I am using two terminologies which are quite strange for you: calling a function and defining a function. And let us declare another terminology: body of the function. These three are important building blocks of any function. First, you need to define a function, what the function will actually perform. Then you will need to call the function. If you want the function to do what it is designed for, then you have to call the function. And what the function do is actually defined inside the body of the function. So these three things combinedly make how a function works. So first we need to define a function, and then we have to call the function in order to execute the function. Let us see these parts all together diagrammatically. Here you can see the definition of a function. Okay, this line is actually function definition, and it has four different components. To define a function, you have to use the keyword def, which stands for definition, and then any descriptive function name. Here, name of the function is function underscore name. As it is a function, it must be followed by parenthesis, and it must be followed by colon. These four components actually make a function definition. But there is only the half part of the story, only one side of the picture. Once the function is defined, you need to call this function in order to perform, to execute it. So these are rest of the program statements, blah blah blah. And when you reach here at this location, this is actually calling a function. To call a function, we just write name of the function followed by parentheses. And then, as I just mentioned, once you call the function, the program jumps from the location from where it is called to the location where it is defined. And it will execute this function, whatever code it is written here in the body of the function. This is actually the body of the function. So each time the call is made to a function name here, the program flow jumps to the body of the function and execute the statements here. Once the function finishes execution of the statement inside the body, what will happen? We actually have returned to the point at which the function was called. Means from where we take the jump? From this location. After execution, where we have to jump back to the same location from where we actually make the jump. And in the above, in this figure here, this jump actually occur 2 times. How many times we are actually calling this function? 2 times. And this is actually the advantage, reusability. You can call this function as many times as you want. You can call this function from any location inside the program that you want. Reusability. Once you call this function for the second time, the same scenario will happen. Program flow will jump back to the function. Hey, you have a call. The body of the function will be executed, and then the control will transfer back to the location where it was taken. This is how actually a function work. Now let us see different types of functions. We have two types. Generally speaking, we have two types of functions in Python: built-in function and user-defined. Built-in functions are those which are provided by the language itself. And we have seen several examples of these built-in functions. When we were studying tuples and list, we applied several functions. Even in the case of strings, we applied several functions on the string to perform different operations. All these were examples of built-in function because they are provided by the language itself. And you are quite familiar with the print function and the input function. They are also example of built-in functions. Okay, we did not need to define them. You just call them, and the interpreter knows where the definition lies. But in case of a user-defined function, You need to develop these functions by yourself. We will be defining user-defined functions in this lecture. In the theory, in the practical session, we will actually see how we can actually define and call a function. So stay tuned for the practical session, and then you will see how we can actually define a user-defined function. Okay, but at this stage, in the theoretical class, you just need to know that there are two types of function. First one is built-in, the second one is user-defined, and the focus of this week is on the user-defined function. In case of user-defined function, we actually have void functions and value returning functions. Void, as the name indicate, do nothing. When you call a void function, it simply executes the statement it contains and then terminates. In other words, it will not return anything big to the location from where it was called. When you call on the other side, when you call a value returning function, it executes the statement that it contains in the body, then it returns a value baked to the statement that called it. That is the basic difference between void function and a value returning function. Here, no value is returned. In the value returning functions, a value is returned when you call a function. The input function that we used several times during this course, that is an example of a value returning function I. When you call the input function, it actually gets the data the user. When the user type data on the keyboard, it is accepted with the help of input statement. Mean it is accepting a value, and then that value is returned as a string value. Beside from input function, integer, string, floating functions, all are examples of value returning functions. Okay. Okay, now let us explore how we actually define a function, void function, which cannot return a value. And then we will see how we will call that function. Remember, two parts of a user-defined function, defining a function and calling a function, and we will see them in a moment. First, let us see how we can actually define a function. What is the general syntax of defining function, or the code for a function, which is actually known as function definition. Okay, to create a function, you write its definition. This is the proper way. And the general syntax for defining a function is here. As I just mentioned, first you have to write the keyword def, followed by the function name, followed by parentheses, and followed by the colon. These two statements, remember, a function is a group of statements. So this is actually the function. And these statements are known as function block, or sometime it may be referred as function body. And in this individual line in the function definition is actually known as function header. So as a whole, this bunch of code is function definition. And then this function definition has two subparts. The body is also known as the block, and the header, function header. Okay? These two subparts combine to define a function definition. And that is the general syntax. And this is for the void function, the function that cannot return a value. The function header, it actually defines the signature of the function. Here in this signature, the parentheses are empty. We do not have anything inside these parentheses, but we will see in a moment that sometime you can actually write parameters inside these parentheses to make the signature full. And this line actually defines the beginning of the function definition. And the function header begins with the keyword def, followed by name of the function, followed by a set of parentheses, which may or may not be empty, and then followed by a colon. A function can have a name which uniquely identify it, as the case of a variable. A function can optionally have a list of parameters. What is parameter? Actually, the variables that we will write inside these parentheses are known as parameters. And this allow data to be passed into the function. And we will see how we can actually pass data to a function in a moment. Remember, these are optional, as not all functions need to be supplied with parameters. Here you can see the parameter are not provided in this case. Parentheses are empty. So these are optional. Sometimes we require them, other time we do not require them. So these are optional. And a colon is used to mark the end of the function header. This is important. If you do not put them, you will get an error. Beginning at the next line is actually the set of statement. As I just mentioned, they are known as block, a body of the function. And a block is simply a set of statements that belong together as a group. And these statements are performed anytime the function is executed. When you call this function, the statements inside the body or this block will be executed. Okay. So these are two types of syntax. The first syntax is for the case in which the function do not accept any parameter, and the second when it accept the parameter. This parameter list, it could be a single parameter, double parameter, triple parameter, for and so on. It depends on the scenario. Let us see an example of how we actually define a function. First line, function header, signature, and these two lines combinedly, function definition, and this line individually, code, block, or body of the function. Second thing is to call the function, and to call a function we have to write name of the function followed by the parentheses, and that's it. And what is function calling? Let us see what is actually a calling a function mean. A function definition specifies what a function does, but it does not cause the function to be executed. Like this. Suppose you do not have this line written. Up to here, this function definition. Okay. Function definition. Okay. But to execute this line, to execute this function, you have to write a statement that will call it. So function definition actually specify what a function does, but it does not cause the function to be executed. To execute a function, you must have to call that function in order to perform its task. It is like the CR of your class, and you require the CR to take the attendance for the class. For that, you have to call the CR. Hey CR, take the attendance. Once you call, the CR will perform its duty. Same is the case with calling a function. To execute a function, you must have to call it. Okay, and to call a function, you have to write the function name followed by parentheses, and that's it. Once a function is called, the interpreter jumps to the function and executes the statement in its blocks. Then, when the end of the block is reached, the interpreter jumps back to the part of the program that called the function, and we saw it. Okay. Let us see an example of how actually the whole things works. Defining function, calling function, execution function, everything is covered in this program. Let us see. First two lines are comments. Then here, this is the header function header, which is a single line and has four components: def keyword, name of the function, followed by parentheses, followed by colon. These are the blocks, admin blocks. And these lines will be executed once this function is called. To call this function, you have to write just the function name followed by the parentheses. And then the interpreter will jump here. Once this code is executed, it will jump back to the location from where it was actually called. Okay, let us see how it actually works in a graphical way. What happens when you run the program? First, the interpreter ignores the comments, and then it causes a function named here. The name of the function is message to be created in memory, and it will contain the block of the statement declared here in these two lines. Remember, a function definition creates a function, but it does not cause the function to be executed. Then to execute the function, you have to call. Here we are actually calling this function. Okay, once you call this function, the code will be executed. The above program mentioned here, it actually has only one function, but it is possible to define many functions in a program. In fact, it is common for a programmer to have a main function that is called when the program starts. If you are familiar with the C or C++ language, I'm sure you must be able to know about the main function, the responsibility that in C and C++ program execution always start from the main function. Okay, but here in our case Python, there is no concept of the main function. But to let the programmers, the learners familiar with the concept of the main, we will define a function and will give it the name known as main function. But this main is not the same as the main which we used in other programming languages. Okay, so let us see a program that actually contain two functions. Right, here we have def main. Actually, we define the first function. Remember, function definition doesn't mean to call the function or to execute the function. This is the block or body of the main function. Inside the body of this function, we have another function, and that is message. But this is call for the function, not definition of the function. You see, we are actually calling a function with the name message. Where is the message? Oh, it is defined here. We have a function with the name message which is defined here, and again this is block of the function message, and it contains two statements. This function will be executed once it is called, right? And then we have called the main function here somewhere in the program. So let us see how the program will execute. Okay, the compiler, the interpreter will start execution of this program in a sequential way. First, comments, it will be ignored. Comments, ignored. Then def main. Okay, memory reserve, blah blah blah. All this function. Okay, okay, okay. And then we have encountered a second function. Memory created. The name is message. Statements declared. Okay, but do not execute here. Do not execute anything here. Just definition. Then come here. Comments. Ignore it. Come to the main. And okay. Now we are calling a function with the name main. Interpreter will jump. You can see once we reach here, it will jump to the location where main has been defined. First, it will execute the first statement of this function. I have a message for you. This statement will be displayed on the screen. And then what will happen here? We have a call from a message. Now interpreter will take a second jump from this location to the location where the function message has been defined. See, things are like this. We have a message function call inside another function. In this program, we actually have two functions, main and message. Message function has been called inside the main function. So after displaying this message, the interpreter will jump to the message function, and then it will execute the body of this function. What is inside the body of this message function? I am Arthur, king of the Britons. These two statements will be executed and will be displayed on the screen. Once the execution of this function is completed, the interpreter will jump back to the location from where it was called. It will come back to the message function, and the next statement after the message function call will be executed, and that is print goodbye. Okay, this is how actually a function works, or how when we call a function what happens. The interpreter, how it jumps to the location and how it jumps back to the location from where it was called. And this is the diagrammatically representation of these jumps. After that, where we have to return, finally we have to return from where we make the call to the main function. You see, the body of the main function is now completely executed. It's time to jump back to the location from where we actually call the main function. Once we reach here, we observe that no statements are here, which means our program is terminated. Okay, so once you run this program, you will see the output like this. First, this statement will be displayed. I have a message for you. Then we have a message. We have a call for the message function. Inside the function message, second statement will be executed. That is I am Arthur. Third, King of Britain, jump big, display goodbye, jump big, no more statement program is. This is how we actually call a function or how the things actually happens. Last topic is indentation inside the function. Being a Python programmer, Python learner, you must be able to know that indentation is important in Python, not in other languages, but in Python it is very much important. Each line in a block must be indented. And we saw several examples of the functions and indentation was there. You see, inside the body of the function, every line is indented. Okay, you see here, every line has been indented. Indentation, space or tab must be there inside the block of a function or the body of a function. You can also see the concept of indentation here in this program. We have a function. The name of the function is greeting. Has two components. It has two statements, and both the statements are indented. Means free space, or you can say spaces or tabs are there. When you indent the lines in a block, make sure that each line begin with the same number of spaces. Otherwise, an error will occur. You can see both the lines have same indentation. If you put a space here and two tabs here, then the indentation will be different and it will give an error. For example, what do you think about this? Here we have a function with the name my function. The first line, let's suppose, have one tab. Second line has two tabs, and the third line has three tabs. Different indentation, different style of indentation. Okay, so these lines of code will actually cause an error because the lines are all indented with different number of spaces or tabs. The editor that you are using for writing the Python programs, let's suppose idle or Jupyter or Sublime editor or Notepad++ editor, any editor that you are using, it has built-in capabilities to deal with the indentation. Okay? For example, once you write the definition of the function and then press enter, it will automatically indent this line for you if your editor is intelligent. So it will do it automatically for you. Okay, here we have a question that how many spaces are actually required or what is the standard style. There is no standard, but the Python programmers, they are familiar to use 4 spaces to indent the line in a block. But you can use any number of spaces you wish as long as all the lines in the block are indented by the same amount. Okay? That is the last tip about indentation. So this was about functions, how we can actually use them, how we can call them, how we can define them, what are the different types of functions, and what are the advantages of function. To learn about programs which demonstrate the concept of functions, stay tuned and can watch the week number 13 practical session video in order to practice some programs which will demonstrate the concept of functions.